All right, you guys ready to start?
Yeah.
Ma'am. So I'm going to, I'm not going to dispense with the formality. I am going to welcome everybody. So welcome. It's the first day of Twin Cities Startup Week. It's a great week. It's a busy week. A lot going on, and thanks that you could take the time to spend an hour with us today to talk about social enterprises. My name is Grant Henry, and I'll be moderating the first half of today's session. I'm the co-founder of Brio Marketing. We serve social enterprises, nonprofits, mission-driven companies, helping build relationships with the customers and supporters and telling the story of your impact. So we're here today to do a couple things. First of all, this is a 2-for-1 deal here. You get not just one session, but two. Parallel to this panel, we are having a virtual marketplace. You can meet other social entrepreneurs there, and you can support local socially conscious businesses. There's opportunities to both meet and shop. There will be a link to the marketplace in the chat, and please take some time to visit that marketplace after our discussion is over at 2. Lots of great folks there, lots of great businesses. Second, though, we are here to talk about social enterprises. And what social enterprises are, just kind of really big picture, these are businesses that exist not just to turn a profit, but also to make an impact. So if you're an entrepreneur and part of your story or your pitch is about doing good, then your business is a social enterprise. There's a lot more to it than that, and that's what we're going to dig into today. We've got 2 amazing panels of experts. These are leaders in the local ecosystem of social enterprises, and we're going to be talking about starting and then growing a business that does good. So I want to introduce you to our first 4 panelists. And just a reminder that there is that chat panel over on the right-hand side. I've got some questions queued up, but I want to encourage everybody who's watching to ask some questions too, and hopefully we'll have some time at the end of our prepared questions to be able to go through some of that with you. So let's get going here with this first panel. I want to introduce you to these 4 amazing folks. They are going to help lead us through this discussion. So first of all, Connie Rutledge. Connie is the CEO of Innovation Lab in Minneapolis, which is where you are. With over 20 years of experience in entrepreneurship and business management, Connie's expertise ranges from concept design, market analysis, fundraising, product development, operations, strategic partnerships, and really the whole basket. Connie's passion is supporting innovators with practical advice and strategic analysis so that you can recognize your vision in a socially and financially sustainable way. Second, Stephanie Malon-Rufi. Stephanie?
Hello.
Stephanie is the owner and CEO of Genuine Impact Consulting and Coaching. She's a strategic business consultant and a leadership coach for changemakers looking to take their social enterprise to the next level. She's also a podcaster, co-host of the Social Change Leaders podcast for social innovators, tips, actionable ideas, and stories to inspire thought leaders on the front lines of social change. So thanks, Stephanie. Third, Jaime Chismar. Jaime, hi, Jaime. Jaime is an award-winning designer and photographer. She is also the founder of All Are Welcome Here. It's a woman-owned, Minnesota-based business that was founded on a simple idea: respect and compassion for all. It started out in November of 2016 as an idea for a lawn sign, and it's grown into something much bigger. All Are Welcome Here makes beautiful products that promote a more welcoming world and gives 10 to 20% back of all of its sales back to organizations that do the same. Up to $70,000 so far and going strong. And then finally, Ashleyn Przedwiecki. Hi, Ashleyn.
Hi.
Ashleyn is community manager of the Social Enterprise Alliance Twin Cities chapter, soon to be the Social Enterprise MSP, a national organization empowering social enterprises with tools and resources they need to succeed, and working to foster a social enterprise ecosystem in which they can thrive. So this is an awesome panel. I'm sitting among my heroes here, and it feels great, and it feels like I should stop talking and let them take a little bit of the wheel. So let's get into it. Let's start with Ashleyn. And so I started this session by just kind of giving this 50,000-foot level view of what social enterprises are, and I'm hoping that you can fill that out a little bit more and talk a little bit about what distinguishes social enterprises.
Yes, absolutely. So the age-old question of what is a social enterprise has been grappling our region and our communities for a really long time, and our organization has tried to create some clarity around that. And so we look at social enterprise as an organization or company that sells products or services in order to solve an environmental or a social problem. So social enterprises can legally be both a nonprofit and a for-profit alike. But what distinguishes them from maybe a traditional nonprofit or a traditional for-profit is an intentional social impact embedded into the DNA of an organizational model. So these businesses, startups, or nonprofits have committed to integrating social impact as a legal component of their business model. For-profits can declare public benefit corporation status. Luckily, we have that here in the state of Minnesota. So rather than being, an S Corp or a C Corp, they can be a PBC, a public benefit corporation, or they can certify as a B Corp, which is a little bit different. So it's a certification, a third-party audit by a nonprofit that kind of comes in and does an audit of all of their social impact. And a nonprofit can add an earned revenue generation stream. We often look at it as and one that is connected with their impact and has a significant portion of where their earned income comes from. So rather than just relying on grants, these nonprofits can integrate a revenue generation stream to really support the work that they do. So a social enterprise can be both a for-profit and a nonprofit, but they intentionally integrate social into their business or revenue model. So I won't go down a big rabbit hole because I don't want to take up a lot of people's time, but I know clarifying what social in social enterprise means is thinking about social in multiple ways. So an organization can be social by selling. So looking at what types of products they sell or to whom they sell them. So for example, a company selling fresh fruits and vegetables to schools to reduce obesity in youth. So that is their mission, but they do sell in order to make that possible. Social by sharing. So some enterprises are social because they share their profit or their product with other charitable organizations or causes. So Finnegan's Brewery, which is connected with Finnovation Lab, they donate 100% of their profits from selling beer to combat local hunger. And then also looking at social by sourcing. So some enterprises will look at how they make their products or services. So some common ways that ventures can look at this include environmentally friendly processes, employing vulnerable or traditionally underemployed populations, looking at investing in minority-owned suppliers, BIPOC artists, inclusive hiring practices, and just like sustainable materials. So social by selling, sharing, or sourcing is like the deeper ways in which an organization can really integrate that social into their DNA. And we could go on forever, but those are just sort of the high-level spaces in which we try to create clarity of distinguishing what a social enterprise is.
That's awesome. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff there, and a lot of stuff kind of feels like it needs clarity. And because we're talking specifically now about starting a social enterprise, and I'm sure that question, like you were talking about, the legal entity, whether you're an LLC or a 501c3 or a B Corp and all of that, that's a decision that has to be made up front, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's something thinking about, like what aligns most with your mission and how does your revenue stream match that, I think is a really important component when you're starting out and thinking about what kind of impact you want to make and what are the numerous ways in which you can do it. And many enterprises are multiple of these all at the same time.
So it sounds like the sort of decision that you need some help and some resources in order to figure out what the right approach is. So let's talk a little bit about resources. And Stephanie, can you just kind of talk a little bit about what resources are available for people who are just going to be starting up a social enterprise, you and your friends at home?
Yes, and when I talk about resources too, I sometimes like to distinguish between the resources you need to start your business model, to bring your idea, to reality, and getting some advisement as to what legal structure or how you're going to be having that impact, as Ashleyn kind of went through the different ways to have impact. But I also just want to mention too that as you launch a social enterprise, you're also becoming a social entrepreneur. And so you yourself also need to recognize that you might need resources just to help your own development in this field. So I just like to also put out there that not forgetting that, like, realizing what are aspects of yourself that you might want to, skills you might want to learn as you're going along this process as well. But yes, and certainly here in the Twin Cities, we have some great communities that have resources, whether it is connecting through community or through more education and workshops. And obviously Social Enterprise Alliance is a great resource, and which is a national organization, but also here in the Twin Cities, they have our own chapter here. So that's a great place to go. And I've also some other places, if we're just looking locally here, also Impact Hub can be a wonderful place. I know we're going to hear more from them in the second half. And then also I work with clients who have done women clients through Women Venture. They have a lot of workshops and ways just to help learning just how to be an entrepreneur in general. That can be really helpful place as well as Neighborhood Development Center. Those are 4 places that I've worked with that I know a lot of the social enterprises that I've worked have also found those as resource. And I will put in a little plug online. I love the Stanford Business School has a great social entrepreneurship like whole part of their website, and they just have a lot of great resources there as well. So that's just a fun place to poke around. Obviously a lot more on the internet as well. But another, and so this also, now that you're kind of learning and educating yourself, another thing then is to really hone in on the community and really meeting people. I think that's really important as you're going, right? Not to just sort of stay isolated in learning this knowledge and figuring it out, but also meeting people. So all of those places that I listed, obviously you can meet people through there as well. Also, I will say, I think 1 Million Cups is another great place to connect to other people who are in there doing work, and they often have social entrepreneurs presenting at that as well every week. And then the other thing I would suggest is, depending on what the social or environmental problem you're solving, but then once you get going, to really get into that community, because you need to make sure you're solving for a problem and your solution is really going to match what's happening. And so that's also, as you're really learning and getting those resources, is then really honing in on that area that you're focusing on. So, and I will also say, then just keep reading and listening, right? There's so many books out there. I will put it, I love Lean Impact, which is by Anne-May Chang. Probably most people have heard of that. That's a great book. And also it's out podcast. I have a podcast. Our reason we have that is to put more information out there for free resources, but that's just another great way to start consuming information and learning more of what is out there.
I love it. And I especially love that you mentioned the community factor. So one thing that I tell people, as I talk outside of this community about what the social enterprise community in the Twin Cities is like, I always emphasize the fact that it's so supportive and it's so nurturing. And I think that the fact that it's primarily populated by women, there's just a lot of strong female leadership in this community. I think it's great. It's awesome, and it sort of reinforces that support that is all around. It's everywhere. Thank you. That's great. Another thing that I hear a lot about in this community is the accelerator programs and the incubator programs, and kind of cohort-based programs that will help entrepreneurs develop that sense of community and move ahead. And Connie, I was hoping that you could talk a little bit about what those programs do and how those benefit folks who are participating.
Sure. So I think, you know, as Stephanie was just mentioning, connecting with the community, that's one of the primary benefits of any kind of cohort-based program, is building out that network. And for social entrepreneurs, I think sometimes it's great to connect with other people who are driven by mission or driven by impact, because sometimes it can feel a little lonely, and you maybe can even feel a little bit crazy, right? That like, what? You're trying to combine, you know, capitalism and social impact. How does that work?
What's this all about?
So it can be really helpful and just sort of good for your self-reinforcing understanding that this is possible, and we're all experimenting and we're working together to bring a change to the world. So, you know, in addition to that, you're building out your network with experts or potential investors or partners, and, you know, connecting with that community of entrepreneurs helps you build your resilience and your strategy at the same time. So I think that's one of the key components of a cohort. We've seen that we launch our third cohort of our fellowship program next week. And so over the first 2 years, that's been one of my biggest takeaways, is like the connections that happen between the entrepreneurs, and those persist after the fellowship is over. Michelle can maybe speak to that a little bit later on. So anyway, the other thing I would say is accelerators and incubators and sort of formalized programs like that help you recognize a blind spot or multiple blind spots. So it's really easy for entrepreneurs to fall in love with their idea, right? And sort of just see all the wonderful things about it. And then what becomes a little more challenging is articulating exactly what the value is that you're creating or what your go-to-market strategy might be. And then you're forced in these different programs to sort of put all that detail out there and then have people react to it. And sometimes everything that makes sense in your head doesn't always make sense when you either put it on paper or you're explaining it to other people. And these can be some safe environments where you can share what you're thinking and hear that feedback and iterate, right? And keep working at it until you get the right combination of clarity and strategic thinking. And then I think lastly, I would say they help you identify your next step. And this is where I would caution all entrepreneurs to think about fit when you're looking at these formal programs. You know, fit based on the stage of your business. You know, are you just an idea and you need help articulating what that idea really will be as a business? Or do you have sales and you need to think about how to grow or how to scale your operations? There are different programs for different parts of that journey, and you want to make sure you're a good fit. Because one of the key things they can do is launch you into the next phase of your business. So for our fellowship program, that's very early stage. We want to work with people who have ideas, maybe they have expertise in a particular social problem area, and they're looking at developing a business model. And it's unique in that we're trying to also create leadership development skills specifically around for the entrepreneur. And then we have another program that we're launching that's Impact SKU, which is all for consumer goods. And that's more about scaling your business and growing that operation. So it really looks very different from the fellowship program. But I think both have in common that by the time you finished, you know what you're doing next, right? Are you raising capital? Are you doing a MVP or a prototype of some kind? Building your team, maybe finding a co-founder is a key milestone. And so that's something that these programs can really help entrepreneurs delineate what's next.
Yeah. And I think that's really so important and one of the key differentiators. And I just want to say that the fellowship program at FinLab is incredible. I've watched now 2 cohorts go through, and I'm proud to say that I call a number of them close friends. I've just been working with them and getting to know them, and to a person, they all talk about how phenomenal the program was and how much benefit they got out of it. the instruction and the leadership from Connie and Katrina and the FinLab folks, and then just learning from each other and learning from previous cohorts. The second group learns from the first one. This third cohort will learn from the second one, and it really just fills this whole ecosystem with a lot of talent and support. So it's super cool to watch.
I want to add that, like, I'm obviously most familiar with FinLab programs, but that's true, I think, for every accelerator or incubator that I have any familiarity with. Like, that alumni base grows and they give back, and it's just a really great way to enter into a community.
Yep, absolutely. And thank you for pointing that out. We're lucky to have a number of incubator and accelerator programs like that here in the Twin Cities to go for. So awesome. So finally, Jaime, I've left you out of this conversation, but I want to pull you in here because you've got a story, and it's a story that early stage founders are going to relate to, because you came into this not really thinking, hey, I'm going to be a business person. You came into this like, I have a great idea, and because there are so many people who are kind of in that situation right now, I was hoping you could kind of talk a little bit about your journey and what it's like as an early stage founder.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I just want to address the topic of community, and I will say the sign "all are welcome here" is something that was designed by our community, is continuing to grow because of our community. Our message has been translated into 30 languages and counting, and it's because of our community and how much they care. I will say, I've always had this dream of doing a TED Talk of how not to start your social enterprise organization, because really, like, All Are Welcome Here started as, in this basement right here, as a lawn sign. I'm a designer, and I just put some ideas out on Facebook right after the 2016 election, and I just wanted to make a sign of support to show my neighbors, my friends, my family that I support them and they were welcome here, and that our community, valued their humanity. And I think the 2016 election, not to get too far into the weeds, the rhetoric was really terrible. And it really was kind of the start of my anti-racism journey as well. And I think that kind of plays a little bit into All Are Welcome Here too. The biggest benefactor of where our sales go are organizations that, support a more welcoming world. And I feel like the ACLU actually has gotten about $50,000 in donations for what we have accomplished. So yeah, it just started as a lawn sign. I thought, I'll throw it on Facebook. I was editing and designing it in real time based on feedback from the community. I knew it needed to be square so people could put it in their little social, like their little, little icons on like Instagram and Instagram too, just to look awesome on Instagram and Facebook, on social media. And then it just kept growing and growing. And I said, okay, well, I just want to order a box of 50. Anybody want to go in on it? And someone in the comments was like, you better put a few more zeros behind that. And so All Are Welcome Here just whoosh, took off. And I don't remember much of 2016 other than it was a huge blur after that. And then 2017 was really crazy as well. And the business, because we didn't have a plan, because we didn't have infrastructure, it was a lot like building a plane in the air. And it was very, very stressful, because you're doing this here and you're doing this here. And, as a solo boss lady entrepreneur, I wear a lot of hats. I also have the benefit of being a freelance designer for the last 10 years, and I've worked with a lot of startup businesses. And so some of the problems that I was solving were very familiar to me based on what other businesses had gone through, but to actually live through it yourself was crazy. And I wish, had I taken the time to step back and actually land the plane for a minute to refuel, to take advantage of these resources that are available right now that you've met with Ashleyn, Connie, and Stephanie, because, it can really help your launch be a little better. So 2018, I kind of went skidding across the runway a little bit. And so now we're trying to figure out what's next. And, we have another election coming up in 2020. And I thought, this project might be done by then. But I think what the events of 2020 have shown is that this message resonates even stronger than it did in 2016. And so how do we continue to do what is important to All Are Welcome here, which is support organizations that create a more welcoming world, amplify voices in our community that really talk about, the change that we need to do to make our world more welcoming. It's a lot. So I could probably talk all day about this project. It's definitely changed my life for sure. But I really do think if you are going on this track to be, you have an idea, take the time to really do your homework and to really make a plan, because you can, when working with a cohort, people can see things, they can see your blind spots, they can help you move forward. And then, part of the success of some of the things we've done for All Are Welcome here has really been based on the connections we've made. We did a fundraiser, just a really silly, not even silly, just really simple thing. We wanted to just raise some money for NAMI Minnesota because they're moving a lot of their mental health services online. And, because we had reached out, like all of a sudden we had we had We Sparkle and we had Brio Marketing and we had Power of MSP 100 and Hayley from the Minneapolis Craft Market. We all worked together on this project, and this very simple small idea raised $12,000 in like 2 weeks for NAMI. And it's little things like that that add up too. I think sometimes people think if they're a social entrepreneur, it has to be this big, flashy, crazy idea. And I don't think so. I mean, you could have a small business and you just donate 5% of your profits back to like a women's shelter, just something that really is meaningful to you and your group and your mission. It doesn't have to be lots and lots of zeros to make an impact.
Yep, I think that's absolutely right. And kind of circling back to what Ashleyn was saying about, it's just, start somewhere, and that's really all you need to do. And the story of collaboration, and really everyone on this panel is so strong and heavy into collaboration. And that's just one thing that's, again, super impressive to me. We only got a couple minutes before we turn this over to Michelle, but I just want to go quick lightning round around the room. One piece of advice. Jaime, you already gave one piece of advice, so I'm going to go with you last. Okay. One piece of advice for a budding social entrepreneur.
Absolutely. I would say whatever it is that your business or your product or service that you're selling, the closer it can connect with the impact you're trying to make, the easier it will be for you to talk about what you're doing with your customers and for yourself and your team. So make sure that whatever it is that you're doing is integrated into the specific area of impact that you're trying to make. So if you're trying to solve hunger, then make sure that the business, product, or service isn't like necessarily selling a random keychain or something. Like, make it connect with your values and with the value of your mission, and it will be a lot easier to tell your story.
Intentionality. Thank you. Connie, how about you?
I would say stop Googling and go talk to real people. So it's really easy to think you're doing all your research on the computer, but you will learn a lot more by conversation with customers, with people who are experts in the field, beneficiaries, maybe if you're looking at a particular impact area. Like, just go talk to everyone.
So true. Thank you. Jaime.
I would say just don't be afraid to reach out to your community. I mean, like, your followers, we get such good ideas from people just by asking a question. And I think maybe that comes from my background of working online. I used to work for StartScreen.com, and my favorite editor was the fun and games editor. And we would just throw stuff out there and just see what sticks. And I think it's okay to fail and fail fast and take those learnings and learn from those learnings, right? Like, just don't be afraid. And then my last little thing as a woman, don't suffer from imposter syndrome. There are many different ways to be a boss lady, and all of those ways are good. And you'll find a way that works for you. So if your idea is good enough, you're going to get there.
Love it. Thank you. Stephanie, any last piece?
Mine's super quick. Just do it. People just sit there. They just, I don't know what. Now's an idea. People just do it. Now's the time.
I love it.
That's it.
Thank you so much. I mean, this has been a great, and it's been super inspirational. I hope everybody here is excited and motivated to turn that dream into a reality. But now we're going to switch gears a little, and we're going to talk about growth. So once startups are launched and they get some traction, there's a point where growth and scaling are going to take center stage. And so to kick off that discussion, I want to turn things over to Michelle Maryns, for the second half of the discussion. Michelle is the founder and CEO of the WeSparkle Company. It's a public benefit corporation that helps underestimated entrepreneurs start, operate, and grow their ventures via a suite of AI-powered software tools. Prior to WeSparkle, Michelle was Chief Strategic Initiatives at Meta. She has an incredible resume behind her, and I'm just going to stop talking and let her get to it. So Michelle, take it away.
Thank you so much, Grant. And maybe you can help me make sure that the other speakers are not muted. I don't know. We're having some issues. So Junita Flowers is actually not Michelle Maryns. I'm Michelle Maryns. But this was the only way that we could figure out how to get her in this room. So I want to thank everyone that's been speaking and also introduce our next set of panelists who are going to talk about the next part of a social enterprise, going from starting a social enterprise to growing one. So I will let everyone introduce themselves. I'm not sure why, oops, sorry, Tim, how to unmute you. Do you see a button that says how to unmute yourself?
Yes, there's a microphone.
Okay. Do you see that, Junita? It's at the bottom in your toolbar. There's a microphone.
Can you hear me?
Junita, yes, perfect. Okay. Why don't you go ahead and start, Elaine, with introducing yourself? Sorry about that, Tim. And there's Katie. So we have everyone now. So this is great.
Hey, everyone. Good to see familiar faces. My name's Elaine Rasmussen, and I am CEO of Social Impact Strategies Group. We are a growth and incubation company that supports enterprises and investors to help do their work better. And I'm the producer of Connect Up, which is another resource for you to network, be in a culturally grounded space to connect with other investors, entrepreneurs, whether they're social entrepreneurs or otherwise, but also with the larger ecosystem. So folks like the Finovation Lab, Impact Hub, you'll be able to come to Connect Up and connect with folks there. And I'm so glad to see that so many of our Connect Up folks are here.
Mm-hmm. Thanks so much. Can we have Junita introduce herself next?
Yes, so I'm Junita Flowers, and first let me apologize for having horrible lighting. I'm actually in a corner in the basement at my production facility because it's so loud in the building. So I am the founder of Junita's Jar. We are a mission-driven cookie company creating conversations to educate and eliminate relationship violence against women. So I'm taking the concept of using food as a tool to bring people together to talk about those tough conversations, specifically around relationship violence. Is that it? You wanted me to say?
Oh, yep, that's great. And okay. Can we have Katie go next and introduce herself?
Hi, all. Hope you can hear me. So lovely to see such a great panel and so many great friends. Impact Hub, I'm the executive director and co-founder of Impact Hub, at least for our local organization here in the Twin Cities. We have about 100 locations all over the world, about 17,000 members. And I was inspired when visiting another Impact Hub in California and just was eager to bring the organization here. As you can see from the panels, we have so many amazing social entrepreneurs and wanted to give them a community to come together, really before COVID, in a physical space, and then provide resources not only here locally, but nationally and globally for whatever your passion may be when it comes to growing a business.
Great. And lastly, let's have Tim introduce himself.
Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, good. Hi, everybody. I miss you all so much. It's so great to see you, even through the little viewer we have here. Yeah, I emotionally miss you guys a lot to see everybody in person. My name is Tim Roman. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Ecotone Analytics. We do research. We combine research, applied econ, and data visualization to help our clients understand what their impact is what the value of their impact is, and then how to communicate that to stakeholders and investors.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us today to talk about how to grow a social enterprise. I'm going to kick off first with Katie. And my question for you is, what types of resources are there for social entrepreneurs to actually scale and grow their social enterprise? So beyond just starting it.
Yeah, happy to explain. So I am a serial entrepreneur. I started my first company when I was 18 and tried to work on the environment by reducing the pollution in carpet. So I started a little company called Carpets. I was a philosophy major and a business ethics minor. And when I was working on being an entrepreneur, I didn't have the startup resources. Now, years later, growing businesses is even more challenging. And so they're happily coming to a panel like this and events like this, you can learn that there is actually quite a lot of resources. It's just finding the right people and places to grow those. So in a lot of the communities, the beginning panelists, people here, you'll see everyone kind of has their own niche when it comes to growing and scaling your business. Ecotone and Tim, and if you're doing a social business, you may need to report on what does that mean to make a difference in the environment. Ecotone can help you with that. We can direct you, and somebody like me or Tim's network can connect you to him. Michelle, if you're a small business that needs to get help with automation and when it comes to events or when it comes to scheduling meetings, like Michelle's company, WeSparkle, can help with that. Elaine, she knows basically everything there is to know about impact investing, whether it be here locally in the Twin Cities community or whether it be even nationally, because she literally speaks all over the country all the time. And I almost called you Michelle.
Sorry about this. Is the only way we could get her in the room.
If you need to know what it's like to be a Fin Fellow, for example, Junita's Jars has been, and Michelle, you were also a Fin Fellow. They can tell you all about what that accelerator program looks like. If that's not the right program for you and you need to scale even more, you could look at Lunar Startups and all of the experts in that community. I could go on and on, clearly. I don't know how much time. Impact Hub has a number of programs. We kind of are a place that meets you wherever you're at. So come and we will provide, you tell us like where you're at in your business and we can direct you to the right community, the right resources to help you in your next step. We do programs like what was mentioned before, 1 Million Cups. We do weekly events where you can just kind of come to a Zoom and we'll get to know you. We provide community. We do interns for impact. If you want to learn what it's like to work in a social enterprise, we're really special places. We can get you connected to a fellowship or a partnership position with one of our social ventures. And we're also doing a master class. So if you want to actually get and go through a program, Carrie Barrera, look, I have she wrote the book on social entrepreneurship. She'll be doing a class this fall. And so please feel free to reach out on LinkedIn or on our website.
Awesome, thank you. My next question is for Elaine. So one of the big challenges that social enterprises have with growing or scaling is getting access to capital to really be able to grow their work. Could you talk about the different sources of capital that are available and maybe a few pros and cons about them?
So sure. So a social enterprise and the type of capital that's available to you really is no different than if you have any kind of business, whether you're a nonprofit or for-profit, whether you're B Corp or not. There's essentially 3 types of money. And usually anything that's not that is usually a derivative of these 3. The first is grants, or what I like to say, free money. That is money that's usually given out either by your friends and family. That's an informal way to get grants of people just believing in you and giving you money to help you continue to grow your business. It could be more organized through or more structured through a grant making institution such as a philanthropic or foundation organization. Those are limited, and the reason for that is typically foundations have what's called a mandate or their bylaws, and their bylaws usually determine who they can give money to. Most foundations, their bylaws say they can only give money to a 501c3, which is a tax status that says that you're a nonprofit. So if you've been a social enterprise or a business and you've gone to a foundation, you're like, why won't they give me money? They're giving this organization money and I'm doing similar kind of work. The reason for that is because your organization may not be designated as a nonprofit. There are very few institutions across the country that actually give individual grants to people, meaning just a regular person off the street, and or to a business, because they don't fall into that status of a 501c3. Next is debt, and debt is also called loans. So usually that's typically what you'll get from your bank. I believe a lot of the funds that are available through Amita or through a women venture, that's going to be debt. And so what that means is you may have more relaxed terms than you would have if you went to a bank. If you went to one of these institutions like a Northside Economic Opportunity, Neon, or Women Venture or MITA, you might have more favorable terms, meaning the amount of interest you're going to pay, the length of the loan, and the amount of the loan. But basically it's a loan. You're going to have a certain amount of money that you need to pay back in a certain amount of time. Some organizations do offer forgivable loans, meaning you have to hit a certain number of benchmarks and a portion or 100% of the loan will be forgiven. For those of you who maybe applied for PPP, Payment Protection Program, through the federal government, that is a forgivable loan. There are some things that you need to do to qualify, but they have mandated certain parts of it or 100% of that loan can be forgiven. The third, which I feel is the most confusing and the most mythological, is equity. And equity is basically someone invests money into your company for a piece of your company. And I hear particularly from people of color how they want to stay away from equity. And when I typically go through the process of explaining to them what equity investment actually means and the power that they have and the agency they have in that conversation, they tend to be more open to equity. So equity is, I put in X amount of dollars, we agree to how much percentage that represents in the company. But what often is left off at the table in that conversation is that you actually can either buy the equity back, you can defer when that exchange takes place as far as converting it into straight equity. It might be a debt that turns into equity, or it could be equity that turns into debt, but you have a say in that process. It is a negotiation. And I find that sometimes, a lot of times we fail as service providers in letting entrepreneurs know and social enterprises know how much agency they have in these conversations. You can agree or not agree to anything that is presented to you. Now, obviously there are consequences to that. The other person has to agree or not agree to your terms, but it is a negotiation. And actually many of these things, whether it's debt, whether it's equity, or whether it's grant, you always have a say. And it's a negotiation, and it's a bargaining of two minds coming together to figure out what's going to work best. And you should always keep the interest of your business in mind, but know that everybody doesn't always get what they want. The bank doesn't always get what they want. Your equity investor doesn't get what they want. But in that, it allows you to be like, what's my deal breaker? And what am I willing to live without? So regardless of what kind of money you're going to be after, I think you should always have those two questions answered in your mind before you step to the negotiation table.
Thank you so much. That's really helpful, Elaine. And someone pointed out, Ashleyn actually pointed out that you do free office hours. So if people want to talk more in depth with you about that, they can. The link's in the chat. My next question is for Tim, and it's really about, as a social enterprise, you want to be having a positive social and environmental impact. How do you go about measuring your impact? How do you track that? What types of metrics are really important to track in order to be able to measure your impact?
Well, first I want to say thank you, Michelle, for including me and Ecotone in the panel. And again, miss all y'all in person. Kind of back to what Ashleyn was saying, right? Insta, whatever, makeup, whatever. Back to what Ashleyn was saying in the previous half hour about social enterprises are making a leap over modern corporations. Modern corporations, the most modern corporations right now, are being mandated to try to mitigate harm. B Lab, B Corp, whatever. Are you using too much water in a general way or whatever? But social enterprise is kind of leapfrogging that, starting with solving a social problem, then trying to find a business model that will carry along that kind of impact. So what we do, as a lot of you guys know, we use research and data to help our clients understand the value of the different impacts that they're creating through those business activities. So our advice is to begin with a notion of understanding what is your unit of impact. Is that one customer, one family, one unit of service? What is that unit of impact that your debt or your equity is funding and that your business model is creating? And then what are the outcomes associated with that unit of engagement? Is it a change in behavior, like Jaime Chismar's model? Is it knowledge, or is it a resource? And then ultimately, what is the value of that change over time? And very importantly, to get a pitch in for, have you engaged your stakeholders, the beneficiaries, in co-creation or at least ideation or feedback on, are these things, is this the right kind of outcomes that you want that should be associated with this model? So what Ecotone does is kind of line those things up, and then we look at that value of long-term change. We want to know, does that lead to long-term improvements in health, wealth, or equality in general? And we want our clients to be able to project both. So this gets to the KPIs, both the scale of their intended impact, how many thousands of lives are projected to be touched by your model, and the depth or quality of that impact. What is that long-term value to individuals or society? So in a nutshell, what is your impact unit and its marginal cost as you begin to manage your social enterprise? What are the outcomes associated with each of those brand engagements, if you want to call it that? What is your scale? How many lives are being affected? And what is your quality, the depth and value of those effects?
That's really helpful. Thank you so much.
It's probably the most precise I've ever been.
That's excellent, because we don't have a ton of time on this panel. We're moving along quickly and just trying to touch on some things. And of course, you can follow up with the panelists later and learn more. But I wanted to move to Junita and learn from a real life social entrepreneur who's been growing and scaling her business. My question for you, Junita, is how do you go from those early adopters, the first few people that buy your cookies in your case, or other products or services for other social enterprises? They might start out being family and friends, but how do you then grow that into something where it's more mainstream, where people you don't know are purchasing your products?
Sure. Again, thanks for having me, and I do apologize for the horrible lighting. But for me, and what has worked for me is the importance of getting to know who the ecosystem builders are. Because once you get to know kind of who the support systems, who the ecosystem builders are, you can begin to immerse yourself into that community and begin to forge relationships. And then when you begin to build relationships and people understand what you do, what you bring to the table, you have now created a community that is advocating for you and speaking on your behalf when you're not even in the room. So when people have a need or they want to hear about your topic area, you have an entire ecosystem that is going to refer you. That has been the biggest way that I have been growing my business. I spent a lot of time in the beginning just networking. And everyone in this on the panel today, during the journey of trying to explain what I do, I've met each one of them, and I've had a relationship where they've come and then helped me in my business. And then once you begin to build those relationships, and of course you're building your business, you're doing the sales, you begin to become aware of the other support systems there. So as Katie mentioned, I was part of the first cohort for Innovation Lab Fellows. When I showed up for my interview, so you're interviewed by a panel of leaders in the entrepreneur space, I had met every single person on my panel before getting there, from some way that I had networked in the community. So that made me being able to explain what I do and you know, really kind of come off and make this great impression a little bit easier because they were all familiar with Junita's jar. And then you continue to build from there. It's really important that we really narrow in our messaging, what we do. So Ashleyn mentioned it in the last segment about having that synergy between the change you want to make and the product you serve. My business, of course, is a little bit different, but as long as I'm concise, so I sell cookies to change behavior as it relates to relationship violence. So it's important that when I come to the table that it's clear, concise, and everyone understands that Junita's Jar, we're a cookie company, but we're all about creating conversations to educate and eliminate relationship violence against women. So it's easy, and then people can then go ahead and recite that to others, and they're very clear on what I do, even though there may not be that perfect synergy between cookies and relationship violence. And then lastly, you have to ask for whatever that is, whether it's the sale, whether it's the connection, whether it's assistance. Speaking to with Elaine's organization, she has business consultants through her free office hours. So when I was trying to figure out do this crowdfunding, I could access, and usually it would cost anywhere from $120 to $200 an hour to meet with the consultant she has. She even has legal advice on her team, and I can meet with them for that hour, schedule my time, and get some very clear information and support. So as I'm going on my next steps, I'm not having to waste all the extra time because I have this other resource. So again, as long as you immerse yourself into the ecosystem and really understand who the supports are and who the builders are, that's going to be half the battle in growing your business and having a team of supporters that are going to share your message with others. And then do the work because it's hard.
Yes, that's true. That's true. Support networks, super important. We have one question from the audience that I want to make sure we get to just for a little bit. So maybe Elaine, you can address this and just take a couple of minutes. But Leah was asking about resources for nonprofits who would like to add a social enterprise venture to their traditional funding streams. And I know that you've worked a lot with nonprofits, foundations, so maybe you have some insight into that.
Yeah, so here's the unique thing that's different, I think, with a nonprofit that's trying to start a social enterprise is this nonprofit industrial complex, right? And what I mean by that is you're going to need to write a grant for the thing and hope that in 6 to 9 months that you'll get the grant to start the thing, as opposed to a startup is like, oh, I can just start in my garage and kind of figure it out and then put it out there. And kind of when you're a nonprofit, you are already tapping into an over-tapped workforce typically. So how do you make that transition? So we recently have been working with like Merrick Community Partners on even thinking about that. So one of the things that I would say, one, we can help you with that. But two, it has to be, I think, to the point that Jaime talked about in her comments, you have far less latitude to make mistakes than if you were just an entrepreneur, right? So I think this component of planning and being thoughtful and strategic is far more important for a nonprofit wanting to start a social enterprise than an individual, because the failure of that social enterprise has so much more implications to the organization than if you were just a solopreneur starting something and it didn't work out and you can put it away and you can start something else, right? You don't necessarily have that luxury when you have a nonprofit and you're either trying to transition your nonprofit to a social enterprise or you're trying to launch a social enterprise. The last thing I will say about that is launch a social enterprise that actually makes sense. Like, don't, if you are NAMI and you do in mental health, like don't start like a childcare center. Like those two things don't match, right? So, but if you were NAMI and you're like, hey, we're going to be offering an app online that has to do with meditation, okay, that makes sense, right? So make sure that if you are thinking about a social enterprise, that it's in a line, because what you want to do is you want to have economies of scale with the work you're already doing and not tap into something that you don't know anything about, that you're going to have to learn. Stay in the lane that you already know.
Thank you so much. So we have about 4 minutes left. I just want to encourage everyone who's watching this to go to the virtual pop-up market It's at tinyurl.com/virtual-pop-up. It's open until 3 p.m. today. There are a lot of social enterprises over there, as well as other artists and small businesses. And a lot of those pop-ups have been canceled this year, the in-person ones. And so we really encourage you to go there. It's kind of like a video game where you can roam from table to table. And you can actually see what products they have for sale and click on their whiteboards and actually go and purchase those items. So please go to the virtual pop-up market, check it out, talk to some vendors, and support them. Get your holiday shopping done early. And then I want to just leave the last 4 minutes for each of you to have 1 minute of what one piece of advice or tips or recommendations would you give a social entrepreneur on how to grow their enterprise? And I will start with Katie.
One piece of advice, really. I would just tell the community, because they're the ones that you need a mentor, you need a friend, and there's not only us that can help you from advice on the business, but also if you care about social businesses, you're likely going to buy from social businesses, aka go to the next event that Michelle just told you about, because not only are we able to support the growth from a theoretical standpoint, but we're also able to support each other by purchasing each other's products, and that's very important, especially now.
Thank you. Elaine?
I would say 2 quick things. 1, get your back office together. I cannot stress how important that is, of getting your back office together. I was going to give another piece of advice and I don't remember, but get your back office together. The second piece of advice is start your company thinking that you have a 100-person company. And what I say when I say that is to say, start building your systems of your back office while your organization is small. So as you begin to add staff and employees, you're not doing that work at that moment. If you start off thinking, even as a 1-person shop, that you are going to operate as though you are a 100-person shop, it makes it easier to grow to a 100-person shop.
Thank you. Tim?
Well, first, I forgot to say thank you to Impact Hub and Finovation Lab, because we were beneficiaries of those environments. I think we were the first business to officially launch out of Impact Hub, and it meant, these were where these relationships started, and like Junita was saying, it means so much. I would say, just like you would listen to your customer as you develop product, for a social enterprise, you're listening to a customer and probably a beneficiary or some kind of stakeholder. So make sure that as you're doing your strategic planning, this also assumes that you're doing strategic planning. As you're doing your strategic planning to create that kind of impact, have those 2 voices present as you're designing whatever that is you're designing for those constituencies.
Thank you. And Junita, I'm going to let you close. Everyone wants those cookie subscriptions. Your piece of advice, though.
The speaker in me will come out on this part, but I would say educate, create, and activate. So educate your community and your consumers. You want to create opportunities for the partnerships, whether that's with within the ecosystem or whether that's other businesses or social enterprises. And then lastly, you want to activate, whether that's your sales funnel, whether that's your speaking gigs, like whatever that service or product is, you got to activate that. So go out there, educate the people, create the opportunities, and activate the process. And you will be successful. You will cry a couple times, but you will be successful.
Well, thank you so much to everyone for speaking with us today. And please feel free to reach out to everyone here. We are your support network as you grow your social enterprise. Thank you.
Thank you. So good to see you all.
I know, right? Like, let's hang out.
Lovely.
We're not even going to say bye.
I know. Do they just kick us off, or how does this work?
What do we do now?
I thought it would, like, at 2:00, just like black out or something.
We're slowly losing
Michelle.
people. That's a good sign.
I'm just glad you were able to get into it. I was starting to sweat. I was like, what do you mean you can't get in?
Barely could get in, and then I was upstairs, like I had my little space upstairs, and then there's this loud equipment going on today where they're doing something with the vents, so you couldn't hear. So that's why I'm in the cave.
So funny.
Well,
huh?
it's wonderful to see y'all.
Mm-hmm.
Hope
Yeah,
to see you in
definitely.
person.
All right.
Hey,
Have a good
everybody.
afternoon.
All right, see you. See you
Bye.
everyone at the pop-up market.
Yeah. Thanks again, Michelle.